Russia just suffered another massive blow to its prospects of ever claiming any kind of victory in this war. But this time, it wasn't a masterfully executed Ukrainian drone strike or a perfectly planned missile launch that left Russian President Vladimir Putin in a state of rage and confusion. No, this time, Putin's problems come from somewhere far different and quite unexpected: the land down under itself, Australia. The country, which is undergoing something of a military modernization of its own, recently delivered a batch of M1 Abrams tanks, which are widely regarded by experts as being the very best tanks in the world, to the armed forces of Ukraine. And the Abrams tanks are already rolling out under the control of Ukraine's 425th Assault Regiment, nicknamed Skala. Skala is now officially the second formation in the Ukrainian armed forces to operate these particular tanks, with the first being the 47th Mechanized Brigade Magura. The regiment released a Facebook video to confirm the news. The video shows images of the M1 Abrams in action, firing its iconic M256 120mm smoothbore tank gun and traversing tricky terrain. While the Skala soldiers didn't go into detail or confirm that these tanks originally came from Australia, various military experts and analysts have put the pieces together and came to the same conclusion. It's almost certain that these tanks are part of the massive aid package that Canberra has promised to send to Kyiv, which is worth around 245 million in Australian dollars, which works out at about 160 million US dollars. The first tranche of tanks arrived in Ukraine in mid-July, as confirmed by the Australian government, which released a statement on July 19 to mark the moment. The Albanese government continues its steadfast support for Ukraine with the transfer of the first tranche of Australian gifted M1 Abrams tanks to the armed forces of Ukraine. In response to a request from the government of Ukraine, Australia is providing 49 Abrams tanks to help bolster its fight against Russia's illegal and immoral invasion. Ukraine has now taken possession of the majority of these tanks, with delivery of the final tranche to occur in the coming months. The Abrams tanks will add to the mobility and firepower of Ukraine's armed forces and complement other partner support for Ukraine's armoured brigades. The support package, valued at approximately $245 million, is part of the $1.5 billion in assistance Australia has committed to Ukraine since the start of this conflict. Various Australian officials also gave statements, with Deputy Prime Minister Richard Marles stating, "The M1 Abrams tanks will make a significant contribution to Ukraine's ongoing fight against Russia's illegal and immoral invasion." Pat Conroy, the Minister for Defence, added, "Australia stands shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine. These modified M1 Abrams tanks will deliver more firepower and more mobility to the Ukrainian armed forces. They meet a direct request from the Ukrainian government and form part of Australia's unwavering commitment to protect the global rules-based order." Australia's aid package is set to include not just a full battalion of 49 tanks, making the massive round-the-world journey from Oceania to Europe, but also spare parts and support equipment too, which should help Ukraine truly make the most of these new additions to its armour arsenal. And there's no doubt that these tanks should provide a valuable boost to Ukraine's prospects moving forward in the war. As previously stated, when it comes to lists or rankings of the best tanks on the planet, the M1 Abrams is always in or close to the #1 spot. It excels in every metric that matters, be it maneuverability, reliability, survivability, and firepower. And these tanks have well and truly proven themselves in real battlefield conditions on countless occasions. They've been used in numerous conflicts since entering service in 1980, from the Gulf War to the Yugoslav wars, the war in Afghanistan, the Iraq War, and others. Even now, decades after the first M1 Abrams rolled off the production lines, these remain the main battle tanks of the US Army, the most powerful military force in the world, and are more than strong enough to rival or outmatch almost any other tank on Earth. Here's a closer look at what makes them so special. First, every good tank needs to be mobile and maneuverable to withstand the rigors and challenges of modern warfare. Those that are slow, sluggish, or easily stuck when navigating tight urban environments or rough ground have little hope of surviving in the conflicts of today. That's why a lot of Russian tanks, particularly the older Soviet models, have had such little success in Ukraine, with so many of them being damaged or blown up by Ukrainian mines, bombs, drones, and other anti-tank weapons, with open source intelligence analysis group, Oryx, reporting over 4,000 Russian tanks completely destroyed over the course of the war so far. M1 Abrams, unlike most of their Kremlin counterparts, are surprisingly agile, despite some variants tipping the scales at more than 70 tons. This is largely thanks to their 1500 horsepower AGT 1500 multi-fuel gas turbine engines, capable of pushing the tanks to top speeds of around 45 miles per hour on good ground like paved roads, or up to 30 miles per hour while traveling cross-country. The engines also grant the M1 Abrams exceptional acceleration, so it can rapidly reposition or retreat from dangerous areas as and when required. With strong suspension and wide tracks too, it has little trouble navigating difficult terrain and isn't likely to get stuck and need assistance as other, lesser tanks sometimes do. This all ensures that the M1 can be deployed in almost any environment and prove to be an effective and valuable piece of equipment for the forces operating it, outmaneuvering the enemy and gaining the tactical upper hand time after time. But mobility is just one piece of the puzzle. The best tanks also need to pack a punch. They need the type of firepower that can take out enemy structures and vehicles in a single blast, and when it comes to dealing damage, the M1 Abrams sets the standard. It boasts the aforementioned M256 120mm cannon, famed for its power and accuracy. This cannon is capable of firing a wide array of ammunition types, like M830 anti-tank cartridges, M1028 anti-personnel canisters, and M908 obstacle reduction rounds, allowing it to wipe enemy vehicles, troops, and buildings off the map in an instant. Thanks to the M1 stabilization system, the M256 cannon has no trouble locking on and striking its targets even while the tank is in motion. This allows the driver to carry out evasive maneuvers or relocate to other areas of the battlefield while the gunner takes out enemy targets. Plus, the M1 Abrams features an advanced fire control system, including key features like a laser rangefinder, ballistic computer, and thermal imaging systems, allowing it to remain accurate, impactful, and destructive in any setting, day or night. The M1 also has some secondary armament, namely a .5 caliber M2HB heavy machine gun with up to 900 rounds and a pair of 7.62mm M240 machine guns with over 10,000 rounds, offering other ways to take out targets or suppress enemy troops. But as well as being able to dish out damage, this tank also knows how to take it. It's got some of the strongest armor of any tank to ever exist, with layers of ceramics, metals, and other materials providing extraordinary defense against numerous forms of projectiles, including both kinetic and chemical impacts. While it's not invulnerable, it can withstand the likes of small arms fire, heavy machine guns, explosions, and even some anti-tank missiles. The M1's armor is also designed in a modular system, making it easily upgradable, repairable, and replaceable to counteract new and emerging threats. Plus, the latest variants of this tank boast advanced explosive reactive armor and active protection systems, like the Trophy system, which detects incoming projectiles and launches counter-projectiles of its own to intercept and destroy them before the point of impact, negating a lot of damage in the process. On top of all the aforementioned benefits, M1 Abrams tanks also boast ergonomically designed crew compartments, advanced battlefield networking technologies, and countless other advantages. The units shipped to Ukraine from Australia are the M1A1 AIM SA variant, a special model boasting numerous upgrades over the original M1, like forward-looking infrared, FLIR, and far target locate sensors for superior battlefield accuracy and awareness, as well as a thermal sight for the .50 caliber machine gun. The Aussie Abrams also boast an upgraded armor package, which doesn't use any depleted uranium like the American original, and a reconfigured engine which uses diesel fuel, not aviation-grade kerosene. This is a bonus for Ukraine, since it already uses diesel to operate much of its armored fleet. 59 of these units were sold to Australia, and it seems that most of those are now on their way to Ukraine, ready to help Kyiv's defenders protect their homeland and strike back against the Kremlin's invaders. It's worth noting, however, that for all their many benefits, M1 Abrams tanks haven't enjoyed a perfect track record during their time in Ukraine. Some of those delivered to the country in the past have been neutralized by the Russians, and Ukrainian soldiers have sometimes struggled to keep their M1 Abrams safe from the enemy's fire due to a lack of air and artillery support. There have also been other issues and challenges that Ukraine's armed forces have had to overcome, like the fact that Abrams tanks are big targets on the battlefield, often prioritized by Russian drone operators. Some of the tanks sent to Ukraine were also reported to have technical issues like engine and electronics problems, and Ukraine's troops were, at least to begin with, quite unfamiliar with the Abrams, lacking the necessary training and experience to operate them effectively. However, if there's one thing we've learned about the Ukrainian armed forces over the course of this conflict, it's that they're incredibly adaptable, resourceful, and able to learn and improve over time. As the conflict has progressed, they've repeatedly demonstrated a remarkable ability to innovate and adapt to the dynamic and difficult conditions imposed upon them. That same innovation and adaptability should help Ukraine soldiers get more value of these fresh Australian Abrams tanks than those that came before. This is especially important right now, as Russia has not only upped the intensity of its drone attacks in recent weeks, but has also launched a wave of fresh frontline raids and assaults on key Ukrainian locations. The country has been desperate to gain as much ground as possible, as fast as it can, presumably in a bid to project power and strengthen its position at the negotiating table at the recent talks between Presidents Putin and Trump, along with possible upcoming discussions involving Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. It's been ruthlessly ordering small squads of troops forward to take control of villages and settlements, especially in the Donetsk region, where Russian forces have been making a concerted effort to capture the important city of Pokrovsk, a valuable transport and logistics hub. Continuing a trend that's been established and repeatedly proven since the start of the war, the Ukrainian armed forces have been digging in and defending their most valuable strategic towns, cities, and patches of land, and they've been using tanks and armoured vehicles to assist them. In the ongoing Battle of Pokrovsk, for example, Ukraine's armed forces have deployed German Leopard tanks, with Radio Free Liberty reporting in February, since late last year, Ukrainian troops have been receiving deliveries of refurbished German-made Leopard 1A5 tanks. Soldiers on the front line say the updated vehicles are highly maneuverable and give them an edge on the battlefield. More recently, in August of this year, Euromaidan Press revealed those same Leopard tanks are proving vital in preventing the Russians from capturing Pokrovsk. A powerful Russian force numbering 100,000 troops is determined to capture Pokrovsk, but the town is heavily defended by drones, artillery, infantry, and even a few Leopard 2A4 tanks belonging to the bad luck 155th Mechanized Brigade. Just days ago, we got a glimpse of one of those tanks in action, as video footage revealed a Leopard tank completely wiping out a building where a Russian sabotage group had taken shelter. There are numerous incidents just like this, demonstrating the enormous power tanks hold. While drones, artillery, and other pieces of equipment are also important, nothing can rival the destructive dominant force of a main battle tank. As such, it's likely that once initial training is complete, we'll start to see more and more of these Australian-supplied M1 Abrams tanks hitting the battlefields in places like Pokrovsk and other contested areas along the front lines. And it's no understatement to say that they could change the state of play in more ways than one. Firstly, M1 Abrams tanks like these would give Ukraine a major edge when it comes to fending off Russia's assault groups. Let's not forget that Russia has recently adopted the tactic of mostly deploying troops without much or any armour support. Many of them are sent into battle either on foot or on board simple civilian vehicles like quad bikes and motorcycles. If those kinds of vehicles come face to face with an M1 Abrams main battle tank that have next to no chance of survival, the tank's 120mm cannon can turn cars, bikes and other simple civilian vehicles into piles of crumpled metal in the blink of an eye, and troops would have no response to the tank suppressing machine gun fire and thick protective armour. Which leads us to the second huge advantage of the M1 Abrams arrival in Ukraine from Australia. It could force Russia's commanders to rewrite their battle plans and potentially put more of their own high-value tanks and assets in jeopardy in the process. For quite some time now, the Kremlin has seemingly preferred to keep its armour in reserve, holding back its tanks and armoured vehicles like BMP-3s and sending troops in on their own instead. It's likely that this decision was driven by the fact that Russia has suffered such heavy losses in terms of tanks and infantry fighting vehicles since the war began. In the early stages especially, many of its top tanks were taken out with ease by Ukraine soldiers, since they lacked the necessary support to survive, and many were manned by crews with only basic training and little experience, leading to costly mistakes, especially while navigating the dense urban environments of Ukrainian towns and cities. Russia has lost so many tanks, more than 4,000 according to Oryx, and fighting vehicles, over 8,000 of them to be precise, that it simply had to change its tactics. Even at peak capacity, it can only produce a few hundred of its top battle tanks each year, which is simply not enough to compensate for its losses. This is a consequence of the Kremlin's mindless and costly brute force strategy, which essentially amounts to throwing as many drones, bombs, soldiers and vehicles at Ukraine as it possibly can, with the aim of eventually overwhelming its defenders. It's a strategy that is simply not sustainable, especially where vehicles are concerned. Russia is still somehow able to recruit enough troops to mitigate its losses and can make new drones quite cheaply and easily to replace the thousands that are shot down by Ukraine's air defenses each month. But vehicles, like tanks and other armor, are much more expensive and significantly harder to reproduce. And with Ukraine becoming even more efficient at using drones, missiles and other anti-tank weaponry to take out Russia's most prized and valuable vehicular assets, the problem is only going to get worse for Putin's commanders. So, the Kremlin did the only thing it could do. It ordered most of its remaining tanks to be pulled back from the front lines in order to keep them safe and sound. Meanwhile, it got to work digging out rusty old tanks from Soviet-era storage facilities, like decades-old T-62s, which entered service way back in 1961, and T-72s, which first rolled off production lines in 1973 and are dramatically outdated by today's standards. Because of this, the Russian assault groups attempting to capture key cities like Pokrovsk are under-equipped and outmatched. They're coming up against Ukrainian armor in the form of Bradley fighting vehicles, Leopard 2s, and now M1 Abrams in fights they have zero chance of winning. Because of this, Russia's losses are likely to keep on mounting up, unless the country rewrites its doctrines all over again. With Ukraine's new M1 Abrams guarding the front lines, the odds of a major Russian breakthrough are declining by the day. Its commanders may, therefore, decide to roll tanks and armor back into the battlefields in an attempt to even the odds. Even if it does so, those same tanks and vehicles would then be at risk of being blown up by Ukraine's missiles, drones, mines and other weapons. In short, the arrival of the M1 Abrams tanks represents a lose-lose situation for Russia and another big vital win for Ukraine, all thanks to Australia, which also shows how Ukraine can rely on the generosity and support of numerous major allies all over the world. Russia, meanwhile, has very few friends to call on for assistance, aside from Iran, North Korea and Belarus. Now, if you're interested in learning more about how Australia is surprising experts around the world and strengthening its defences to become a much more serious military force for the future, make sure to check out our recent video detailing how the land down under is transforming into a modern-day military powerhouse through record-level defence spending and investments in advanced weaponry and equipment. Or for more news about the war in Ukraine, check out our breakdown of how the Ukrainian armed forces have successfully mastered the art of drone warfare, changing the state of play across the battlefield and forcing Russian commanders to desperately rethink their tactics. And finally, be sure to subscribe to our trusted military news channel too, so you can stay in the know and up to date on all major military events, including the war in Ukraine and other important conflicts and developments all over the globe.